Aloha, I am Tom with Rise Above Your Chart, and today we're going to talk about Saturn return. Now, before we get into the exact idea of a Saturn return, we need to understand Saturn. And the reason why we need to understand Saturn is because if you want to understand what's coming from a Saturn return perspective, you have to understand what Saturn is. Sometimes people come to these videos and they realize, okay, I just want to understand Saturn return. It's this big event. What else is it? How do I handle it? What do I do? What's the way to navigate it and that type of thing. And because they don't have an understanding of what Saturn is, that's when they tend to run into problems navigating the Saturn return. I had one person, sometimes I do the occasional pro bono work, and I had somebody who had asked about Saturn return and was so concerned that this person wasn't going to be able to get through it. And I took a look at the chart, and it turned out the person was already going through it. And I had explained what was going on and everything. And then it made something so much easier for her to navigate. And so this is important. So a little bit about Saturn. Saturn is our responsibility. It's not just what we're responsible for, it's the things that are going to occur in our life that will prompt us to develop a sense of responsibility. So whatever we become responsible for is through the Saturn experience. Saturn also represents our maturity and discipline. So through that, we grow up, we learn more, we develop discipline, we develop a desire to stick on something, to continue to persevere and persist, and we develop discipline in that nature. Saturn also sometimes refers to our career. I mean, it's the ruler of Capricorn, which is the natural sign of the 10th of career. So sometimes it's related to that. It's our work. My astrology teacher, Pam, would always say, Saturn's your work. Saturn's what you're here to do, basically. And it can definitely bring up the types of lessons that we need to learn in our life. So very important as we talk about rising above our chart and we talk about cycles, the idea of what types of lessons, what types of themes might we occur in our life, Saturn's very important with. And how we find structure, how we find a structure in our life, and whether there is any at all or not, even very important. Recognition can be important because with Saturn, because it's helping us to get out there in the world to some degree. It's our work, right? And so as a result of our work, we can be recognized, or it tells us whether we want that recognition or not. Saturn can tend to be, it's effectively bringing spirit to Earth. It's an indicator as to the energy that we put out there and the energy that we are coming back into Earth. If you notice the glyph, the icon for Saturn in astrology, opens up to the bottom, toward the bottom, because it's representing opening up to the Earth. Jupiter, on the other hand, opens up to spirit. Okay, and it's obviously Jupiter is often related to higher learning and spiritual path and truth, and the greater big picture, right? So here we're looking at doing something tangible, often with what it is who it is that we are. And so considering it's like Saturn is the energy of what we do coming into the physical. Okay. Very much related to the physical the physical aspect of who we are in terms of being here in the physical world. Okay. So when we realize, so why is Saturn sometimes a big deal then, is it's because when it's coming back around, we're faced with having to navigate the things that if we didn't learn that level of responsibility and discipline and maturity with, we're going to be faced with having to do it. It's kind of like a swift kick in the behind from our spirit, from the universe, if we haven't been doing what we're meant to do. And it can also just be turning points, major turning points in your life. And I'll get to a few of those examples in a little bit, right? So it's going to be what allows you to develop those types of things, to get those lessons, to have that structure, to develop that type of responsibility. So really straightforward for the most part. Now, I want to talk, before I get to examples of Saturn returns, I want to just talk a little bit about the idea of Saturn cycles. So as any planet goes around, we have an opening square, an opposition, a closing square, and a return. The reason why I bring these up here, and each one of these could turn into a much deeper conversation. However, I just want to point out that sometimes people they hear about Saturn return as they're spiritually awakening, and then they get all concerned about it because it's like this 29.5-year cycle, plus or minus 6 months or so on either side. And they get concerned about it. And yet you've been hitting mile markers along the way that lead you to the Saturn return. So put simply, the opening square, I mean, roughly each of these mile markers is going to be about 7 years plus or minus a little bit from each of the last one, right? So that by the time you get to the return, you're roughly at about 29.5. So, if you then think about it, right, what are these mile markers doing? They're just helping you learn, prepare for the things that you needed to do. I lost a parent when I was kind of near my opening square. I became a teenager right around the opposition. I was going through a major turning point during college when I went through my closing square, and I had a significant breakup in a relationship during my Saturn return. And now I'm even at the next opening square, and ironically, I'm in a new relationship, and also on the other side of the country, and working on things of a spiritual nature, and working on a business that provides things of a spiritual nature, because where my Saturn is and the sign that it's in, money and spirituality are both very important to that path. And as I look at each of those turning points between the opening square, the opposition, the closing square, and the return, each of those turning points prepared me to become who I needed to be to take on this next level of responsibility. Okay. Now, a little note about timing. As I said, it's plus or minus certain points here and there, because if there's a Saturn retrograde period or whatnot, where Saturn kind of slows down a bit, goes and it appears to move in a different direction, so it's kind of goes backwards in the zodiac. It can be a little bit longer, for example. But the idea of timing is these are not. Sometimes people just think, oh, when I turn 29, boom, it's my Saturn return explosion, and no, it's not. There's a phase, there's a cycle, and it does look like the bell curve. As Saturn transiting Saturn, the Saturn in the universe comes back to the degree, sign, and minute of your natal Saturn. That's as it reaches that point, that's called applying. And then as it's at that point, that's exact. And then as it pulls away from that point, it's called separating. And so that gives us an idea of that. Well, it gives us the idea of, are you coming close to it? Did you hit it? And are you tapering off from it? Okay. So the woman who I was helping navigate through Saturn return, she said she was going through a breakup, and I looked at the timing of it, and we talked about it a little bit, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's it. That's the Saturn return. Like, you're now past that point, right? So I believe the Saturn was separating at that point. It's like, okay, you're past that point. Then she asked an important question. She said, is this the return, or are we meant to get together? Am I meant to find somebody else? All these other types of things. And I looked at the rest of her chart, and I'm like, look, anytime somebody goes through a Saturn return regarding a breakup, or regarding relationships in general, I've seen Saturn returns, I've seen Saturn returns be breakups or even new relationships. Okay. And so anytime somebody goes through a Saturn return around a relationship, then either it's a breakup or the relationship moves to the next level. Okay. So if you're in a relationship at the time of your Saturn return, either the relationship ends or the relationship moves to its next phase, marriage, engagement, whatever. Okay. If you're not in a relationship at the time of your Saturn return and your Saturn has a level of connection to relationship energy in your chart, then, and you get into one, then that can be the Saturn return as well. Okay. So, she was looking at it almost like it was saying that her responsibility was to be single. And I'm like, no. It doesn't mean whether you're supposed to be single or not. It's just what needs to happen to help you uncover what your responsibility is. Okay. So interestingly enough, I saw online there was a thread of a bunch of people that were commenting about going through breakups right now, current day, at the time they were writing it, about being 29, turning 30. And somebody even wrote a comment saying, is this a thread for people that are 29, turning 30 going through breakups? Because it was that was the vast majority of people there that were writing at the time. And I looked at that and I said, it's just a bunch of people going through Saturn return. No big deal. It really isn't. The experience of the return, yeah, it can be intense, but it's easy to navigate if you can prepare for it and you're aware of it. Other experiences of Saturn returns, I had a friend whose partner moved out. I had another friend who got married, a friend who had, I know people that had a kid, got divorced, bought a house. So it's those major life events often that prompt you to that next level of learning on your path. It can be just about anything, but it's significant to you, and it's often related to either relationships, money. For some, it can be health related. Like sometimes it's okay. They decided to, somebody decided to get their health together and go work out and eat healthy or something like that. Often I know people that got married, got a divorce. I know people that, bought a house, sold a house, people that, had a kid, people, even I'm based on the age my mom was when she had me, it was her Saturn return. Right. So, I mean, I was her Saturn return. So, I mean, these are the types of things that can occur there. And so to navigate it is starting to be aware of these things at the other Saturn points and just recognizing that swift kick in the butt is to really get you to that next phase of your life. My current Saturn square is way easier to navigate, having gone through my first Saturn square, Saturn opposition, a closing square, and Saturn return, and getting the lessons from that. It's not impossible, but kind of close to impossible to avoid whatever that lesson and that experience is supposed to be from a Saturn return. So it's kind of interesting because there were a couple of my friends and they were talking, and I was sharing a little bit about astrology, and I hadn't even mentioned this. And one of them was like, I'm not sure I believe that. And I said, well, and then this was when I asked him, when did your partner just move out? Like, how old are you? Because it was significant to him. It was significant to him. And he's like, I'm 29. I'm like, ta-da. And then the other guy next to us laughed. And I'm like, wait, how old are you going to be when you get married? And he said 29. And I'm like, they both looked at each other and looked at me. And I'm like, yeah, guys, there is something to this. Like, it 29 and a half plus or minus. And so we do have to look at the chart for the exact time periods. But again, it's based on that bell curve. So you have the idea that it is going to ramp up and then peak and then taper off. Sometimes the event isn't the peak. Okay. Sometimes it's when you might get the lesson from the event or something like that. Right. So it could be moving toward a breakup, and then a breakup might leave a person having to be alone for a little while. And then that's the peak of the return. And then as they get more comfortable being alone for a while, the Saturn starts separating, and then they prepare for the next cycle, and then they're able on the next Saturn square even to be in another relationship, for example. Okay. So it's just an idea of some of the things to be mindful of. This is important to pay attention to and reflect. Sometimes people discount this cycle just because it's 29 and a half years roughly. This is an important cycle because it's showing you your life's work. It's giving you an idea of these types of things. It doesn't mean that a relationship is, or a marriage is, or a kid is. But what it's going to do is it's going to prepare you to to get new lessons and turn a new page in your life's book based on that particular event. Okay. And if people tend to tape, what I've noticed is sometimes if people avoid getting the lessons of the first Saturn return, the second one comes around. It's a little bit of a stronger nudge. So the more you just navigate that experience with the first Saturn return, the better. And then paying attention to the Saturn square opposition and closing square. So if you have any questions or comments about this, please do put them below in the comment section. And if you like this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe. And as always, aloha, hui ho. I'll talk with you again soon. Take care.